Hello everybody and welcome to another Brighter Shores video, and today, now that the game has been out for a few days, we're gonna talk about everything that's good, everything that's bad, and everything that's super weird, and there's a lot of that about this game. Now, I'm gonna be as fair as possible, but I just want to point out that I will be comparing this game a lot to RuneScape. I think that's fair given how much of the core gameplay is derivative of old school RuneScape, and that's pretty much the only game you can even compare Brighter Shores to at all. As always, feel free to skip ahead to the sections you care the most about, and make sure to subscribe to my channel below for more Brighter Shores and for more MMO related content. Alright, let's start on a positive note with everything good about Brighter Shores. Okay, let's start with how the game looks, and lucky for us, it looks really good. They've gone for a charming aesthetic and simplistic graphics, and this is actually a great idea for a relatively small team. Everything looks consistent no matter where in the world you are, and the softer aesthetic makes the game easy to look at for hours and hours, and trust me, this is a hugely underrated thing when it comes to games built around grind, which this game definitely falls under. Plus, because it doesn't really bother with realism at all, it's very cheap to run. It runs perfectly even on really weak devices, and there's never any performance issues whatsoever. Now, I can see how this style would kind of turn some people off, but given their target demographic overlaps so much with RuneScape, I think this was a good idea and it's executed pretty well. The next good thing is the questing in this game. Just like RuneScape, there are lots and lots of quests, both main quest and side quests that you can do in this game. Now, a lot of them require certain skilling levels to complete, which can be a bit of a pain, but they're all quite well written and come with that classic humor and dialogue that we've all come to love in RuneScape. Now, in terms of plot and story though, the main storyline isn't great. It's incredibly generic. It even has the literal stereotypical magic crystal that the story is based around, and honestly, it's boring enough that I can't imagine anyone actually cares about this main story or its characters at all. That said though, the side quests are much better. Going around completing these and following little mini storylines is genuinely fun and interesting. Plus, it's a new game. Questing is just one of those things that has a lot of potential to get better, and as more areas and more storylines come out, it just might. As for right now, I think they've done a good enough job for what we already have, and they've pretty much laid out the groundwork for more questing and for questing to be as good as it is in RuneScape. So I actually think the questing system as a whole is still pretty good. Okay, so that's all the good stuff. Unfortunately, now it's time to be fair and talk about everything bad about Brighter Shores. Okay, now before I get to the bad stuff, I just want to say this isn't blind hate. Every opinion in this video and this channel in general is always made in good faith because I love this genre and I genuinely like this game and I want it to succeed. Alright. So the first thing I want to talk about is the first thing that you're going to run into and kind of hate, and that's the combat system. Now, old school RuneScape doesn't have the most complex or deep combat system in MMOs, but it does offer a good amount of freedom in terms of how you can fight, and even more so in how you can pull groups of enemies. This is actually kind of a skill in RuneScape, to position yourself smartly and pull well. In Brighter Shores, none of this exists. You start a fight by choosing a weapon you want to attack with, and that's mostly it. There are special attacks, yes, but they're not all that complex either. You just use them when you can, and again, that's it. Most fights are just you starting it and then waiting and watching until it ends. What's even worse though is that you can actually only fight one enemy at a time. I'm not exaggerating. The game literally only allows one player to fight one enemy at a time, and you're fully healed between each battle too. If you're standing in the middle of a group of aggressive enemies that attack on sight, they'll just wait their turn to attack you one by one like they're goons from some 80s action movie. There's nothing fun at all about this combat system, and combat by far is the skill that I, and from what I can see most people, hate leveling the most. I feel like if they had just used the exact same combat system as the one in old school RuneScape, it would honestly have been better. The second thing I want to bring up is the user interface and the user experience. Now, I understand the concept of a simple UI that avoids overcrowding and all of that, but the user experience in Brighter Shores is frankly quite bad. The settings menu, we'll start there, barely has any settings to change. It doesn't even have a way to control mouse sensitivity, so you have to be okay with how fast the camera turns. Now yes, of course, old school RuneScape doesn't have these options either, but Brighter Shores, believe it or not, wasn't released in 2007. It was released 4 days ago in 2024, so it definitely should have these settings. On top of this, getting into combat, which again is lame as hell, isn't even as easy as a click. You have to click 3 times. 3 different actions need to be performed just to enter combat, which again, then is just watching it happen. Then there's a way to deposit items into a bank quickly, which is nice, but there's no way to search for an item inside the bank or organize them in any way but the default. The chat window, if you ever, want to talk to other people while playing this multiplayer game, takes up an ungodly amount of screen space for literally no reason at all. Now I could go on and on and on, but I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. I think you get my point. For whatever reason, the user interface and the user experience of Brighter Shores is really not well thought out at all, and it's honestly weirdly unfriendly. Now you might notice, if you take a peek at the timeline of the video down below, that the good and the bad sections are kind of short, much shorter at least than the last section. Now, there's a good reason for that. So let's talk about everything really weird about Brighter Shores. Okay, so there are a few decisions made by the team that created Brighter Shores that I don't really get. And I actually think that if anything, it's these things that are going to put people off of the game. All of these decisions essentially come down to one thing, and that is the episode system. Now, if you don't know, Brighter Shores divides its content into seasons and episodes. There are 4 episodes in each season, and content will be released as seasons. Right now, we're in season 1, and we have the episodes of Hopeport, Hope Forest, the Mine of Mantuban, and Chronopolis. Now, this by itself is okay. It's just dividing the world into regions, and that's really all it is. The weirdness, though, comes from how professions work with this concept of episodes. Each episode, so each region, has its own set of professions. For example, Hope Forest has the woodcutting profession, and the Mine of Mantuban has the mining profession. So if you want to chop wood, you have to go to Hope Forest, and if you want to mine rocks, you'd have to go to the Mine of Mantuban. Makes sense, right? Sure. Now, professions do interact with each other in many ways. For example, items you gather using the foraging skill is used in the alchemy skill, planks you create using the carpentry skill is used to create weapons using the stonemason skill, etc, etc. This is actually quite great until you dive into it. But okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. The first and foremost issue that most people have a problem with is the way that the combat skill works across episodes. The problem is that every time you enter a new episode, you have an entirely new combat profession. In Hopeport, it's the guard profession, in Hope Forest, it's the scout profession, and so on. On top of this, all the gear you have is limited to the episode in which you get them. What that means is that you can't use, for example, Hope Forest gear in Hopeport, even though Hope Forest is further along in the game. This means that every new episode, you have to level your combat skill from 0 and get a whole new set of gear which you'll basically not be able to use in the next episode anyway. Basically, by definition, your combat skill gets reset with every new episode. Now, a couple of days ago, a news post was made on the Steam page that talks about combat resetting between episodes. The justification they gave is that without this system, players who level combat too much will be able to skip new areas when they come out because they're already beyond the level to do them. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Then they go on to mention that other games avoid this by auto-scaling enemies based on your level, but they don't really like that because it means leveling up doesn't actually achieve anything or unlock new content. The problem is that that's not how it works in other games. Most MMOs that do auto-scaling only do so for the main storyline. The rest of the world doesn't auto-scale. Plus, their reasoning doesn't even fully work in their own game. A ton of the enemies you unlock in Brighter Shores as you level a combat skill are the same enemies you fought before but at a higher level. So they do scale enemies. They do scale enemies in their own game right now. And there's an even bigger point that they're missing. If they really wanted this system, the least they have to do is make different combat skills have different mechanics. Make them actually distinct professions. Guard, scout, minefighter, and watchperson right now are pretty much the exact same skill with the exact same mechanics. By constantly resetting the combat skill, every new episode feels the exact same. You're leveling from 0 every time, doing the exact same thing in each episode. There's no sense of continued progression, and it makes each episode feel almost like its own game disconnected from the rest of the world. Now that is going to be a recurring theme because combat isn't the only reason it feels like that. Going back to the other professions for a second, because they're constrained to a specific region, you get all sorts of bizarre and pretty unfun behavior. Okay, take a look at how this fishing profession progresses. Level 0, mottled flounder. Okay, we can catch that in East Beach. Sure, no problem. Level 6, olive flounder. We can catch that, in East Beach as well. Okay, sure. Level 12, stone flounder caught in East Beach. Wow, must be a pretty big beach to have all these types of fish, huh? No, actually, because you're catching, for some reason, the exact same fish in each of those 3 levels, but in a different color. The only difference between an olive flounder, a stone flounder, and a mottled flounder is its color. Because Gower and his team decided that fishing has to only be done in Hopeport, we're having to catch the exact same fish across many levels to make it all fit into one region. This is so much worse than actually having to go around the world catching different types of fish, or chopping different types of trees, or foraging different types of materials. It's just so much more restrictive for, again, no reason. And it gets weirder. The alchemy profession typically uses items that have been obtained through, honestly, many different professions. It's kinda cool. 2 of these professions, however, are foraging and gathering. Now, what's the difference between foraging and gathering, you may ask? Well, absolutely nothing. They are both exactly the same thing. Collecting materials off of the floor or off of plants or something along those lines. Foraging and gathering work the same way. They have the same mechanics. Things that they gather could go in either profession. Foraging and gathering are identical skills, but in Brighter Shores, they're separate skills that you have to level independently, all because foraging is in Hopeport and gathering is in Hope Forest. That's really silly. And it gets even weirder. Look at these 2 drops from monsters in the Mine of Mantuban. The eye is from a level 6 enemy, and the cockroach mandible is from a level 14 enemy. But both of these drops require an alchemy level of more than 100 to use. It takes half an hour to get to level 14 combat in the Mine of Mantuban, but it would take dozens and dozens of hours to even get to level 100 in alchemy. It just doesn't make any sense. It's great that the professions work alongside each other, but the episode system has made it so messy, mismatched, and unnecessarily convoluted. And that's the thing. It makes things so much more convoluted, but at the same time, the episode system and this idea of separating professions according to episodes provides nothing at all. It doesn't benefit anybody. It just makes it weird for the most part and bad in some other parts. Now, I've had many arguments about this with other players, and the prevailing wisdom is that it's not so bad and it's something that you can live with, which is why it's in this weird section and not in the bad section. But at the same time, nobody has been able to figure out why it's a good thing. This isn't like a norm in MMOs either. This episode system is a decision that Gower and his team made consciously. And okay, this may be kind of crazy to say, but I'm starting to feel like the entire decision and this whole episode system was created entirely for the purpose of going, hey look guys, this isn't a copy of old school RuneScape, this has an episode system. I don't know, I started somewhere in England and I ended up in Texas. And again, you may not mind the episode system, and that's why it's in the weird category and not the bad category, but there's nothing to like about it either. It's a decision that was made seemingly for nobody's benefit, and I just don't get it. All this is to say, because of this philosophy, nothing about the game's world makes any sense. And in fact, the whole game feels less like an MMO with a cohesive and fun world, and more like a series of levels in a cookie clicker like auto battler type of game. And there you have it. That was everything good, everything bad, and everything really weird about Brighter Shores. All in all, I think I'm as confused as Gower and his team. The amount of decisions that have been made for seemingly no benefit to the player or even any benefit to the developer is quite weird. I have no idea what the vision for this game was or is, and just from what I see, I don't know if that team making it do either. Now again, I don't want this to be a hate video or for you guys to think that I'm actually just throwing this game out and hoping it fails. It's the opposite. If you watch any of my previous videos, you'll know exactly how excited I've been for this game. I've been praising it up and down for months now, waiting for it to come out. Unfortunately though, in its current state, I actually can't recommend this game to anyone besides hardcore fans of skilling-based number go up gameplay. And that's a shame, because it has so much potential. Now it can still reach its potential because after all, it's still in early access and they could still fundamentally change their philosophy, but we can't judge a game based on what it could be instead of what it is. And right now, what it is a confusing mess. Anyway, that's enough out of me. What do you guys think? Am I being unfair or are you just as disappointed as I am? Let me know in the comments below because reading and responding to your comments is like my favorite part of uploading these videos. Either way, as always, thank you for watching and I'll see you guys next time.